is a KOAT Action 7 News Commitment 2020 debate special.
Welcome to this Commitment 2020 political debate. I'm Doug Fernandez.
And I'm Shelley Rabando. KOAT and the Albuquerque Journal have partnered this political season to allow you to hear directly from candidates running for important offices in our state. For the first time, the two women running for the congressional seat in northern New Mexico will face off. Alexis Johnson is the Republican candidate, and Teresa Fernandez is the Democratic candidate.
New Mexico has 3 congressional districts. These women are running in the 3rd district. It covers our state capital, Taos, Farmington, the Navajo Nation, and many pueblos. Now, the seat is open because the current Congressman Ben Ray Lujan is running for U.S. Senate. For the next hour, we will hear from both candidates. Here are the rules. I'll be moderating and asking questions along with Shelley Rabando and Kent Waltz, the senior editor at the Albuquerque Journal. Now, you're going to hear opening and closing statements. When a panelist asks a question, the candidate has 90 seconds to answer, and rebuttals are permitted. The questions come from our editorial committee at Action 7 News and the Albuquerque Journal. Also, some from viewers like you, which have all been vetted. You're also going to hear the candidates ask each other a question. There is a 1 minute allowed for the answer, and the person asking it will get an automatic 30-second rebuttal. The results of a hat draw have Teresa Fernandez going first with opening statements. You have 2 minutes.
Hello, and thank you. Thank you to those who are listening. Your vote is the most important part of a democracy, and I thank KOAT and the Journal for hosting this as well. This district deserves to be represented by somebody who understands its community, who knows its beauty, but also its poverty, and has worked to create opportunities in our communities. I grew up in Las Vegas, New Mexico, where I went to Head Start and fell in love with learning. I will support early childhood education and full funding for education from pre-K through college or technical school. I'm going to be talking about the issues that matter in this election and about my experience. I'm both a small business owner, and I've helped start businesses and create jobs. I'm a leader on affordable housing and know that a vibrant economy requires housing, jobs, and healthcare. I've helped build 3 rural health clinics. I've worked alongside our Native American tribes and for Latino civil rights. I am running and talking about these issues not as part of a campaign stop, but because I have real life experience in them. But I'm also a cancer survivor. I lost 2 beautiful brothers to addiction. I'm the mother to 3 wonderful sons. For me, like for many of us, these issues are real. I'm running on a platform of protecting what we love, protecting our healthcare, our environment, our economy, because it is presently under attack. We know that. I commit to you that if you elect me as your Congresswoman, I will do everything I can to take bold and courageous action to protect what we love and to invest in our future. Thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to our conversation.
Alexis Johnson, 2 minutes for your opening statement.
Good afternoon. My name is Alexis Martinez Johnson, and I am running for U.S. Congress in District 3. I am a wife, a mother, and environmental engineer. I live in Las Vegas with my husband and 4 children. I was born in the district and raised by my loving grandparents. I earned an environmental engineering degree from New Mexico Tech and worked in our energy sector to keep New Mexico's water clean, air clean, and soil clean. We kept jobs for New Mexicans and energy supplied to better our world. I am glad New Mexicans get a chance to see very different paths for New Mexico. I speak directly with New Mexicans. My opponent has dodged forums held by New Mexicans in favor of coastal elites and high-profile politicians, while I have worked closely with Rio Rancho business owners and farmers and ranchers for 30 years. Do you see results in New Mexico's education, in water supply to Navajo Nation, in decreasing substance abuse and crime? I've driven through the forests in northern New Mexico. I see mismanagement. As an environmental engineer, I am keenly aware of our climate and stewardship. The difference between my opponent and I is I listen to New Mexicans. We need a scientific, common sense approach to managing our environment while creating jobs. We can do that together. It's time to put party politics aside. Vote Alexis M. Johnson. Muchísimas gracias.
We begin with a topic that has impacted the world for 7 months. Of course, the pandemic and COVID-19. Shelley Ribando has our first question. Shelley.
Thanks for joining us today. Small business owners are struggling in New Mexico since the pandemic. Some, as we're hearing, will never recover. What should Congress do to help businesses close to collapse? And what incentives do they need? Please be specific.
Ms. Fernandez, you go first.
Thank you very much for that question, because we really know that, especially in New Mexico, where a lot of our businesses are based on tourism, are based on our creative industry, which I care for so much, that they are suffering. So the PPP program, the Payroll Protection Program, was a good first start. I helped several businesses actually apply and get those loans. But we know there wasn't enough money there, right? And too much of that money under the Trump administration ended up going to businesses it wasn't intended to, very, very wealthy businesses. So we know now that during this COVID crisis, there's been more inequity. The billionaires have gotten even richer, and those of us like in New Mexico who have small businesses are suffering. Right now, the HEROES bill that the House has just proposed has more money for small businesses. And importantly, that bill also has money set aside for restaurants. They target restaurants, and they target those venues like we have in New Mexico, where normally you'd be hearing music, right? Or you'd go and listen and go to theaters. So those are the kinds of bills that I will propose, where we actually get small business money to real small businesses. Like I said, I'm a small business owner. I've helped start many a small business. So this is somewhere where I'll bring my expertise to bear to create more economic activity here.
Ms. Johnson, your reply?
My family comes from a small business owning family where we employ New Mexicans from Las Vegas and Mora. These people were down on their luck, receiving assistance from the government. They had no opportunity, and the small business provided that opportunity. They are the backbone of New Mexico, and in U.S. Congress, I would further stimulus monies to make sure that the business, like my own family, can pay the mortgage, can pay the family's salary, so that we don't have to make the decision that we are making right now. And that's looking families in the eyes and telling them that we will have to lay them off. It is interesting to note that the federal monies that are put out are divvied out by each governor in each state. So in Congress, I will make sure that monies go to the states. But remember, the governor divvies this money out. I want to make sure that we have a diverse economy, an inclusive economy, where people of all ages and different skill sets can receive jobs. I look forward to creating infrastructure opportunities and collaborating with our labs and the private industry. Thank you.
Thank you. Kent Waltz from the Albuquerque Journal has our next question. Kent.
Thank you, Doug, and good afternoon to the candidates. Do you trust the federal government to ensure the safety and effectiveness of a COVID-19 vaccine before making it available to the public? Why or why not? And when there is a vaccine, do you believe the federal government should make it mandatory, except in certain medical circumstances?
Ms. Johnson, you go first.
Gracias. Our scientists and engineers are working tirelessly to make sure that they work in conjunction with the federal government and private industry to provide a safe vaccine. It is abhorrent that persons like my opponent and people from the very far left progressives are saying that vaccines are now unsafe. We are doing whatever we can to make sure that vaccines will be safe and delivered when they are done. So I am here to trust in our scientists and engineers that they will provide that for us. I promote vaccines for our elders that in our Navajo Nation that have been hard hit, as well as in our senior citizen centers. We need to make that vaccine available. And I would like to secure funding in US Congress to make that happen. We also have to allow for persons that need exemptions where they are not able to take a vaccine due to a particular reaction. So we must have exemptions for those medical issues. Thank you.
Ms. Fernandez, your reply.
Thank you. So I do trust that we will get a vaccine to this COVID virus. What I am concerned about is that we do not use a vaccine as a political ploy. And the Trump administration has said that he is going to rush a vaccine. You know, he's giving it a name to say we're going to rush. And he has said things that are not consistent with what the scientists and the public health experts say. So when he said we're going to have a vaccine before November, and then the public health experts said it's not going to happen that soon, that creates uncertainty among the voters. It creates uncertainty among Americans. So what we need to do is make sure that we reinstate an ability to trust science, that we have leadership that is not undermining what the scientists are saying. So I do think that we are going to get to a point where we have a safe vaccine. We must make sure that that vaccine is available first to our first responders, our healthcare workers, those most at risk, including on our Native American communities. With regards to making it universally available, we must do that. And then we need to ask that unless there's an exception, that we make it a requirement if you're going to go to school. The same way I send my kids to school fully vaccinated, I think in places like that, we need to make sure that everybody is vaccinated, like at school.
COVID-19 has caused another challenge for New Mexico students, especially in rural areas like some in the 3rd Congressional District. How will it truly be determined if a student should pass or fail and be held back? Should students be further punished if they struggle with the learning from home model? Ms. Fernandez, you go first.
I think this is a really important question. I've been having this conversation with both parents and educators over the last several weeks. One of the reasons I really started it was because I was meeting with Native American Pueblos who have Pueblo families who have their children in the Bureau of Indian Education schools, right? And the BIA, even though the Congress gave them money, $500 million has not been spent because they have not bought the equipment that they need to learn online. And being able to learn online is one of the big problems why we need broadband, right? And we're going to get to that later. I've worked on getting broadband in. We need to make sure it's available everywhere. But what this tells us is, what do we do? How do we help? Because the experts also tell us our youngest need to be in school. We need to listen to the health experts say, but they could help pass a disease if we're not careful. So I've been wondering, and I've been asking our experts, what should we do? Should we look at maybe funding school during the summer months to do a catch-up year? Do we need to make some accommodations? So what I would do to answer this question is not rely on what I think, but pull together the education experts, and then if I'm in Congress, provide the funding that might be necessary to do that catch-up work.
Ms. Johnson, your answer?
Thank you. I have spoken to our New Mexico teachers, and they are doing an amazing job given the conditions. So I come from a family of educators here in New Mexico, and I promote the teachers that they are not inundated with extreme government control whereby they cannot do their job. I also want to make sure that we get broadband access, and we have had 12 years of Ben Ray Lujan, who has endorsed my opponent. And if we're going to continue the status quo, we're going to have no results. We have 70% graduation rate in New Mexico. How many years do we have to go, New Mexican voters, before we have a change? It's time to use your voice and use your vote and make sure that your voice is being heard. In our Navajo Nation and our Diné lands, we need to make sure that those children that cannot go to school are able to have broadband access in their community, not only at the chapter houses, but where they live. And it has been a travesty that only now, when Ben Ray Lujan gets a donation from Comcast, now in this COVID, that he's seeking broadband support. You're going to see a continuation of the status quo. And it's time for a change, New Mexico. It's time for the forgotten New Mexican to vote.
Okay, staying with COVID, another question right now from Shelley for both candidates. Shelley.
Do you think the federal government should have the power to order nationwide measures such as mask mandates, school closures, and lockdowns? Or do you think those decisions are the purview of state and local governments?
Alexis Johnson, you go first.
I promote safety and our government to come to the table. But as my opponent has said that she wants to have a mask in the entire United States, this blanket approach has not been good for New Mexico small businesses and is not good for the entire United States. We have seen here in New Mexico, small businesses shut down in the low risk areas. So the blanket approach, the government control that my opponent advocates for is not the right one. I believe in the Constitution and I believe in the states' rights. What's not delegated in our US Constitution should be set out to those states.
Ms. Leger-Fernandez, your reply?
So I think leadership matters. And what we have seen with regards to two different kinds of leadership here in the state of New Mexico, our governor took swift action and did listen to the scientists. And as soon as we had our first COVID case, we began implementing measures to protect New Mexicans. Remember, we are looking at what do we need to do to protect New Mexicans and to protect Americans from a health crisis that we haven't seen since the 400 years, right? And in contrast, at the national level, President Trump has really failed us. And without a national mandate of what we do, we haven't had a national mandate on masks, even though his scientists and the heads of CDC, Dr. Fauci were saying, once they learned about the importance of masks, they were saying, yes, we must have masks. Look at how New Mexico has done so much better than its neighbors because we had a mask mandate early. If we would have had a mask mandate across the country, perhaps we would have slowed it. We need to recognize that the United States has lost over 200,000 people. We have more deaths than any other country. And a lot of that is because we haven't had national leadership. So on a pandemic, you need national leadership. So there is uniformity in responding to an emergency. So yes, I do agree that we need national leadership, mask mandates, PPEs, the science, all of it. Let's put science above politics.
Okay, debate rules allow for questions directed to the individual candidate. Ms. Johnson, you were cited for not wearing a mask, speaking of masks, on the Santa Fe Plaza while campaigning. Does this mean you believe mask mandates infringe on your personal freedom, or do you believe they are effective in slowing the spread of COVID?
I believe that we should not vilify individuals, including Pelosi not wearing a mask in the salon, nor Fauci in the bleachers with his buddy not wearing a mask, or Feinstein, or myself. New Mexicans are working very hard. You know, we are all trying to get through this pandemic, and we must acknowledge the fear and anxiety in the community. I have worn a mask before that time that you spoke of, and I wear a mask when I go to our Dinet lands. I have my hand sanitizer. I keep my social distance. So I do believe that wearing a mask helps in confined spaces. However, we must also make sure that we are tempering our constitutional rights with science and work together and make sure that we are not overriding one another. And we have seen sometimes that these gaiters that we put on may be dispersing particles where that virus is able to be transmitted more so than not having something on. Those N95s are really the best precaution. And I want to speak to the constituents and have science for the people and make sure that we are making decent decisions. So we all need to work together. And yes, I do wear a mask.
Thank you. The district the two candidates are running in covers part of the Navajo Nation, and we know it has been hit especially hard by the pandemic. At one time, it was the worst in the country. Our next question is from Kent Waltz. Kent.
Thank you. Native Americans account for about 30% of New Mexico's COVID deaths, despite representing only about 11% of the population. This has brought home the fact that many on tribal lands lack such basics as running water. What do you believe the federal government should do to address the serious and long-standing problems facing the Navajo Nation and other tribal lands?
Teresa Leger-Fernandez, you go first.
This is a travesty, the manner in which COVID has exposed long-standing neglect. The United States has a trust responsibility to Native American tribes and their people. And the United States has failed to honor that trust responsibility for not just decades, but centuries. This is something that I have worked with Native Americans hand in hand. I have done a lot of work getting broadband and clean water and those kinds of things, health clinics for our Native American people. But there's never enough money and there's never enough resources. During this pandemic, what we have seen is that even though there was $8 billion set aside to assist Native Americans, they did not get it out. The Trump administration held much of it back. And so that is a problem. We must fully fund our obligations to our Native American communities. I will champion both putting in, making sure we have clean water everywhere. We need to put in a lot more solar on the Navajo Nation so that they can have the electricity, so that they can pull down the broadband as well. And that can be done with dispersed solar. There's lots of new technologies that we need to start using to make sure that everybody in Indian country has access to healthcare, broadband, electricity, the opportunities they need to thrive.
Ms. Johnson, your answer.
I'm an environmental engineer, and I don't just talk, I do. I have spent my career working with the community, federal regulators, environmental groups, and the constituents to come up with real solutions. My opponent is advocating for extreme policy that will have solar panels. You're going to see children in other countries carrying bags of rocks to mine lithium, cobalt. These different types of elements are going to destroy our environment. So when you want to talk about sustainability, let's come to the table and make scientific, common sense solutions. I am not here to provide extreme policies like my opponent, which apparently she knows nothing about. Ben Ray Lujan has been in office, and now in the pandemic, we are barely seeing these conditions such as the water and electricity getting into play. I have been in Navajo Nation. I speak directly with the constituents. If you want to change, now is the time. It's not about talk and speaking with coastal elites, and it's about coming up with solutions for New Mexicans. I can bring the solutions, and together we can work together for a better New Mexico. Solar panels and windmills are okay, but you know the sun doesn't shine, nor does the wind blow.
This afternoon, we are hearing from viewers about the questions they want you to answer as well. David Browning wants to know, as our New Mexico government looks to oil and gas revenues of more than 35% of our total annual budget, what is your position on fracking and fossil fuels? Ms. Johnson, you go first.
Thank you very much. And I'm really excited to talk about this because as an environmental engineer, I just want to provide awesome solutions. As Ms. Leger Fernandez knows, fracking is really not something that's done up here in the north. So when we want to rabble rouse and cry and make the community afraid, that is sad what you're doing to the New Mexican voter when we don't even really need fracking in the north. We do not want our electric bill to be increased by the Green New Deal and the energy initiatives that my opponent is advocating for. These are extreme. They will put New Mexicans out of jobs, and you're going to see a very stark difference between the very affluent and the rich and the very poor. And you're going to be told time and time again, we know better, right? The government knows better. How about coming to the constituents, to the scientists, to the engineers, to the small business owners, and coming up with solutions? Not just talk from political wealth and political families. It's time the voice of the people comes out and we start making a real change. After 30 years here in New Mexico, you can tell I'm passionate because nothing is getting done. It's time for a change. The courage is here. Vote Alexis M. Johnson.
Ms. Leger Fernandez, your reply?
Okay, so the question was, what do we do about the fact that we rely on a lot of oil and gas for jobs and for our budget? So I do think that we also are facing a climate crisis, and we know the climate crisis is real. You know, the last fire, we don't have fires in August, and the last fire, it destroyed the acequia of which I was a commissioner. It's now blackened. If you are going to deny climate crisis, it's because you're not looking outside and you're not listening to the facts. So we need to transition away from the oil and gas and fossil fuel. We're not going to stop it now, but we do need to transition. And New Mexicans know that we have sun that shines and we have wind that blows, and that with new technology, the solar and renewable energy is less costly than coal. We also know that we need to invest in the communities like in Farmington, where we're going to be transitioning away. My opponent says she is an environmental engineer, but she really is an engineer for the petroleum companies. Her family, her husband's family, owns an oil and gas company. So remember that that's the context in which she's talking about. What I'm talking about is the need to diversify our economy, to create an innovation economy, so we also diversify our tax base. We have too much of a boom and bust in New Mexico, where we have resources, then we don't. Right now, there's only about 18,000 jobs, direct jobs in oil and gas. Renewable energy, clean energy could create about 30,000. So I'd like us to get to a more resilient economy, while at the same time saving our environment so that we can enjoy this beautiful place we call home.
And Ms. Leger-Fernandez, your opponent mentioned you by name, so you have the opportunity for 30 seconds more.
Okay. I never got a rebuttal anytime she did not use my name. And so the rules are, if she uses your name, you get a rebuttal.
My family is not an oil and gas company.
Okay.
We actually have a water recycling company, and that is an engineering business. So if you're going to talk about me and my family, I would hope that you would get your correct information.
Ms. Leger-Fernandez, I did hear her. Okay, hold on 1 second, please. Both candidates, please. Ms. Johnson, you referred to your opponent by her name. Ms. Leger-Fernandez, you have 30 seconds more because you had not replied yet. You have the opportunity for 30 seconds more should you choose to take it.
Thank you. I appreciate you applying the rules fairly. So,
well, she mentioned my husband.
Do I get another 10 seconds since she used up some of mine? So with regards to the family, that was in the New Mexican. In the primary, she said that that's what she was. I don't know if it's changed now. So with regards to what we need in terms of what we're talking about, the environment, I've laid it out, and I think it's really important for us to focus on our future. We need to focus on our future and not just on short-term gains. That's why I'm asking New Mexicans to think about this beautiful place we call home and how we need to make that transition.
Our next question from our viewers, and who could be your constituent, is from Henry Gabaldon. Shelley.
Yes, he's asking about your plans to diversify our job market in New Mexico. And I'll add to that question by asking about your plan to keep New Mexico's best and brightest from leaving our state after they graduate.
Ms. Leger-Fernandez, you go first.
This is a really important issue. You know, I have 3 college-age sons, and so that is something that is near and dear to me. You know, I did go away to college. I was very lucky. I got to go to a couple of great places, but New Mexico home, so I came home. And this is where I want both me and our kids to make their life. What I'd like us to see us do is create an innovation diamond. People say triangle, but I say an innovation diamond. We have our 2 labs. They do amazing science. We need to spin out a lot more work from our labs. We've been doing some of that. There's a microgrid that the Journal just wrote about in terms of renewable energy, where you can do microgrids. We are following some of what's happening with the pandemic and the forest fires with Descartes Labs, which is a spin-off of our labs. You know, we have great universities. So I would like to get all of that together and have more of an innovation economy. And I think we have the opportunity to do it. I've been talking to people in Congress about what we need to do to fund that. It would take about $10 billion a year. And it would, for across the country, to disperse it away from our coasts, it would create such innovation. We also have our amazing, beautiful place we call home, right? And we need to get more outdoor recreation involved in that to strengthen our ability to pull people to come visit, not just what they're used to, which is Santa Fe and Taos, but other parts of our beautiful New Mexico. So increasing our tourism industry, innovation economy, creative economy.
Ms. Johnson, your reply.
Well, thank you for this question. And previously, when my opponent mentioned my family, I just want to make it clear that I will not mention her family. And what my family is doing is providing innovation here in New Mexico, which I really promote infrastructure, water recycling, our geothermal capabilities, as well as I 110% support Los Alamos Lab and the awesome research that's going on there to make sure that we have innovation and industry for New Mexicans. What I'd really like to see in Los Alamos is a collaboration with the private sector and the neighboring valley in the Española area where we mentor children and perhaps have teachers from Los Alamos go to these areas to make sure that we have a workforce. Do you know that Los Alamos needs and has needed in the past employees? And unfortunately, New Mexico doesn't have the workforce. So in Congress, I would support various vocational training funding for the labs to work with the community. And this is an innovative approach that hasn't been done. And I think we can really see some change in the New Mexican economic industry, having an inclusive economy. And what does that mean? That means people that have graduated high school in middle management and upper management can have jobs. Coming from New Mexico Tech, I know collaboration is key with our super grid and other industries.
Thank you. The next question is just for Ms. Leger Fernandez. Former Vice President Joe Biden has declined to answer whether he would support expanding the number of justices on the U.S. Supreme Court. Do you think voters are entitled to know his position, and what's yours?
With regards to the Supreme Court, I think what we are seeing is that instead of focusing on the COVID need, right now the biggest crisis our nation is facing is the COVID crisis. And the Senate and the White House have failed to take up or pass a bill, even though the unemployment ran out, even though our schools are facing. So what we should be focusing on is addressing the COVID crisis. Instead, the Senate and the White House are focusing on pushing through in very short order a Supreme Court nominee, right? Even though 4 years ago they said you should not add a Supreme Court a justice to the Supreme Court during an election year. That was 10 months from the election. Right now, we are a few weeks from the election. So that's a hypocrisy that we're seeing from the Senate Republicans. Instead of doing their work, Mitch McConnell has said everybody can go home except for regarding the Supreme Court. Now, with regards to the question about the size of the Supreme Court, that is not the Constitution. The Constitution says that the size of the Supreme Court is established by Congress. So that is a constitutional right for the Congress to take up. I don't think right now that I have a position on this, but what I will say is I know it's a constitutional right that we have in Congress, and I will look at that issue depending on where we are at in January when I am sworn in. My big issue is we should be focused on what we need to and not on this Supreme Court nominee.
Each of you are allowed to ask your challenge or a question. And Ms. Johnson, you're going to go first. Please ask Ms. Leger Fernandez your question, and she has 1 minute to answer, and then you get a 30-second rebuttal. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. And it's important to note that my opponent does not yet have this candidacy. So when you say, when I am sworn in, there's still an election to be had. The question is, why have you done nothing to stand for Hispanic heritage here in New Mexico right now?
So we need to remember that what I have done for my life career is doing a lot supporting Latino cultural preservation. I was President Obama's appointee to the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation, where what I did was bring together people from across many, many different areas to say, we need to make sure that all American stories are included in the American story, including Latinos, Native Americans, Asian Americans. This is part of what I've done. So to say I haven't stood for Latino cultural heritage doesn't make any sense to me. I was, on the board of MALDEF, where I fought for Latino civil rights. You
must only stand when you're getting paid.
Bilingual theater company. All of these things were things I did pro bono. I am very much about supporting our cultural heritage. That is part of who I am. Anybody can go look me up, and that's.
Your time is up. Now you have a 30-second rebuttal, Ms. Johnson.
When our Hispanic statues have been defaced, and it seems like you only stand when there's $1 in your pocket, and that's a travesty.
Ms. Johnson, your second question for your opponent.
My second question is, you have denounced white supremacy, and I denounce white supremacy. Recently, you have said that there is white supremacy here in New Mexico. Can you clarify who are these people you are talking about when you say here in New Mexico we have white supremacy? Are you talking about the Hispanic population here? Is that who you are referring to when you say white supremacy in New Mexico?
Go ahead, 1 minute.
So the wonderful thing about Latinos is that we truly understand multiculturalism and we understand the importance of diversity. I have worked and fought for that my whole life. I am the proud daughter of the parents who helped pass the Bilingual Multicultural Education Act, by which all of the different Native American languages are taught in their schools. So of course, I am not talking about white supremacy being Latino. We're the opposite of that. We are a combination of so many races. So white supremacists that have been in New Mexico include the Proud Boys.
In New Mexico, we say Hispanic. Latino is a national word. Can you clarify Latino? Can you clarify this term, Latino?
Your time is extended. Go ahead. Ms. Fernandez, your
here
time
in
is
New Mexico, we say Hispanic. Please listen to the voice of the New Mexican.
Please, this is not a Q&A. Please stop the back and forth. Ms. Fernandez, go ahead and finish your thought, please.
Thank you so much for letting me finish my thought. I will try to be as respectful, and that's why I stopped talking. I didn't want to talk over her talking over me. So the reality is that in New Mexico, we have had white supremacists come in. And even though we celebrate our diversity here, we must also be vigilant, because there are those like President Trump who refuse to denounce it, who would like to win, who would demonize another in order to win their political power. I am about bringing us all together and recognizing that we are strongest in understanding our cultural diversity, but that there are those even in New Mexico who are white supremacists. I'm so sorry to say that, but they're here and they come and visit like the Proud Boys.
Ms. Johnson, your opportunity now for a half-minute rebuttal.
You know, here in New Mexico, we use the word Hispanic. And here in northern New Mexico, everybody knows that. And it's time that as a congressperson, we listen to New Mexicans. Do you know here in Santa Fe, a Catholic statue was defaced, paint was poured on top of their head. And where was my opponent? That was a veteran, a priest, and the family of the first Democrat senator. I stand with our Democrat brothers and sisters for New Mexico.
Okay, your time is up. Ms. Fernandez, it's your opportunity to ask 2 questions of your opponent. Your first one, please.
So my first one touches on what you talked about earlier, but you did not wear a mask when you were campaigning. You used the fact that you had campaigned without a mask to earn money. If you go to your Facebook, you earn money. And your campaign manager said you did that in order to have a viral moment. So you weren't wearing a mask, you were politicizing public health. How can we trust you if you would politicize such a simple thing as wearing a mask?
1 minute reply.
Thank you, and thank you for this question. How can we vilify and demonize people such as Pelosi when she was in the salon not wearing a mask, Feinstein in the airport, or Fauci in the bleachers? This partisan politicizing is not good for New Mexicans. And as you've heard the rhetoric of my opponent, she is clearly going to work for a national agenda, while New Mexicans will continue to be last in education. No water or infrastructure to our Diné lands and the others in Indian country. I am here to promote New Mexican values, and I know this may be news to you and the rest of the media, but New Mexicans care about putting a roof over their head, food on the table, educating their children, and doing it in a safe environment. It's time to start listening to what New Mexicans really care about. And when you have $1.6 million in a primary and you talk about money, it's time to get dark money out of New Mexican politics.
Ms. Fernandez, you have 30-second rebuttal.
So I agree with you. I'm a champion of campaign finance reform, which is why I've been endorsed by End Citizens United. My campaign doesn't take any corporate money and never took a dime of dark money. I was asking about masks. You actually really didn't answer it, but you raised money off of a video of you saying you had a constitutional right not to wear a mask. This was a campaign statement that you did in July. And so you might
I wear a mask, and it's right here.
But you ran on that issue. Can I finish talking when I don't have
Very
her
quickly, yeah. You have a few more seconds. Go ahead.
So as I was saying, you used not wearing a mask at that moment. You might have changed your mind now because we know that the polling supports people are supportive of the mask. The fact that you've changed your mind now and not politicking on it anymore, I'm glad that you are now wearing a mask to help care for people, because New Mexican value is caring for each other.
Your second question, Ms. Leger Fernandez.
My second question goes to the fact that you have said that you, in your words, I stand with our president, Donald Trump, 100% on his COVID recovery. We know that Donald Trump's COVID recovery plan really placed politics above public health. It has cost us jobs and cost us lives. You have now changed, now that it's not the primary, and now that the Journal poll is showing this strong support for our own governor's approach. So it comes again to the fact that you seem to go back and forth. Are you with President Trump on 100%, as you said, throughout the primary and through June and July? Or do you now agree that the governor has the more solid approach to dealing with COVID?
1 minute reply.
I want to make it very clear. When you start off with your first statement there, you are now politicizing the question. And I really want to focus on what New Mexicans care about. Do you know that shutting down the border with China was considered to be xenophobic? We have a vaccine now, and now your progressive movement says that they don't trust the scientists. You know, with the CARES Act, you say we didn't have enough PPE. 2 teams were out in Navajo Nation. We had public and private sector working together for ventilators and masks. So I support New Mexicans, and I understand that you want to tie me to some type of group, but I made history in New Mexico. I was not supported by the insiders in the Republican Party, and I have become the first candidate to get elected by the people of New Mexico. I made it clear in the primary debates that I work for New Mexicans. I don't work for a president.
30-second rebuttal.
So if you go to her Facebook page, if you go to the Piñon articles, there are many, many times when she said, I stand 100% with Trump. So I am just utilizing and referring to your own statements. And right now we don't have enough PPE. The federal government sent PPE to the Navajo Nation that was defective. This federal government has failed in so many ways with regards to the COVID response. President Trump has failed us. We pray for his recovery, but he's failed us with regards to COVID response, and you supported him 100%.
Okay, our next
the
question comes
governor
from
has
Shelley
those
Rebando.
decisions.
There's no more
so on
rebuttaling.
the federal level, we give money, but that's up to the governor. I didn't know if you understood that.
That you did not have a rebuttal opportunity after that. Please keep your replies. When you're answering a question, answer the question. If you have a rebuttal opportunity, take the rebuttal opportunity. Do not go back and forth when the opponent is answering a question and vice versa. Okay, our next question comes from Shelley Rebando, and it is for both of you. Shelley.
Especially in rural New Mexico, health care is tough to provide and a challenge for a patient to receive. Is there a solution to quality and easily accessible care in New Mexico?
Ms. Johnson, you go first.
You know, I want to make sure that we protect our Medicare for our seniors and our Medicaid for our children that came from humble beginnings, like myself. But what my opponent is asking for is a complete government system, Medicare for all. Kind of like when you go to the motor vehicle department and you're waiting in line, you have only one choice, and that is going to make my children less safe in New Mexico. I want to make sure that I have affordability here when I go pay a copayment, that I can afford it, that I know what bill I'm going to receive. I promote transparency and quality of care. Medicare for all, such as what my opponent advocates here, is going to create a system that we've seen in Indian country as well as our veterans hospitals, which means that if Abuela has a spot on her arm, well, good luck, because she won't be getting seen for 6 months. That is bad for New Mexico's future, and I look forward to covering pre-existing conditions and lowering prescription drug healthcare costs. We've seen the insulin come down from over $140 down to $40. My abuelos used insulin daily. They have recently passed, but you know, it is important to note that reducing that prescription drug healthcare cost is imperative. Having competition between the states will reduce costs. We do not want to have a complete government control like my opponent wants. She knows better, and I think New Mexicans know better.
Time. Ms. Leger Fernandez, your reply.
The question was, what do we do about rural health care? This is something that is very important to me. I have helped finance and build and plan out the programming for 3 rural health clinics. This district is very rural, and so making sure that we have access to care in the communities in which we live is important. I want to make sure that we have full funding for our federally qualified health clinics, which are in the rural areas. We have several, El Centro Medical and different ones in Rag and Mound throughout the north. So these are the things that in any bill that I would consider, I emphasize and prioritize the need to fully fund rural health cares and access to rural health cares. I have supported making sure that we have a universal way of paying for health care. And so what that would do is bring down the costs of care. Because right now, too many people have health insurance, but they do not have the ability to pay for those copays or deductibles. They're bankrupting. We need to make sure that there is no that pre-existing conditions. I'm a cancer survivor. I know how important it is to make sure that we do not be denied health care for pre-existing conditions. The plan that I proposed would actually save $450 billion. It's about who pays, not who controls. We'd all have the same access to our doctor. That's what we want. Affordable health care, in the community where you need it.
Your time is up. What role should Congress play in police reform following the death of George Floyd? What is your understanding of defunding police, and do you support the movement? Ms. Leger Fernandez, you go first.
So following George Floyd, there was a bill taken up by Congress. I think Congress has a role to act, and states and cities have a role to act. The bill taken up by Congress, the Justice Act, the George Floyd Criminal Justice Act, would do many important things, including these, I think, should be funded or should be approved at the local levels. It would ban chokeholds, right? We can all agree we should be banning chokeholds. It would require body cameras and would eliminate no-knock warrants. What we need to make sure is to address the fact that there have been too many lives lost. Black Americans, Latinos, Native Americans, men and women, to excessive police force. We need to not be sending the police in with their ability to exercise deadly force to situations where they shouldn't be there, when maybe really we need is somebody who's skilled in the art of dealing with mental illness. And so we need to make sure that we readjust where our funding goes, so that we are funding the police and what they need to do, but then moving funding and making sure we're funding mental health programs. We're funding those kinds of programs which will bring the crime rate down, so therefore lessening and having a more safe and secure society. Those are the kinds of things that I would like to pursue at the federal government. And I know we're going to be looking at some of those here locally as well.
Ms. Johnson, your reply.
I support our law enforcement who work every single day to make sure that the lives in District 3 in the greater New Mexico, as well as the greater US, that we are safe. And I just want to say that bills that are pushed through, their legislation that's pushed through in Congress that doesn't have both parties take a look at it is a travesty. When you're talking about having video cameras the entire time, there are certain times, such as child abuse, such as rape, such as domestic violence, where the officer really needs to be sensitive to those situations. And as you know, here in District 3, we have 2 of the highest substance abuse counties where a lot of these issues occur in crime. In Albuquerque, which we have a part of in our District 3, we have seen 80 homicides last year, and we're on that rate for this year. We need help. And why would you deny help? My opponent has been given monies from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's PAC, and she promotes defunding the police. My opponent advocates for a scarier New Mexico, and you can just see by her facial expressions that she is not here to listen to all New Mexicans. I am here to bring law enforcement together for legislation
Okay,
that
your
makes
time is
common
up.
sense.
Our next question comes from Kent Waltz with the Albuquerque Journal. Kent.
The Oñate statue in Alcalde was removed. The mayor of Santa Fe removed the De Vargas statue and called for removal of obelisks in the plaza and one nearby honoring Kit Carson. What is your position on whether these historical monuments should be moved or allowed to stay?
Ms. Johnson, you go first.
Thank you for this question, because here in Santa Fe, we have a beautiful, diverse culture where all parties should come together to make these decisions. I think in the early morning hours, taking out a statue here in Santa Fe and proposing that we change Hispanic names here on buildings in northern New Mexico is not taking into account of the community. My opponent has been silent. She has also been silent whenever we saw the defacement of Father Angelico Chavez there with paint poured over his head. When in New Mexico have we ever stayed silent for religious freedoms? And I'll tell you right now, when you turn away right now and you don't have the voice of the New Mexicans, we know that someone like my opponent will not stand in U.S. Congress for all New Mexicans. It's time that we come together and speak with all groups in Indian country, in our Hispanic community, and the greater New Mexico, but not have a fly-by-night taking away of very important cultural monuments that have been here in New Mexico, or the defacement of religious icons. It's a travesty.
Ms. Leger Fernandez, your reply?
My reply, and my apologies, I have a fly that's buzzing around and I was asking my kid to bring me a fly swatter. So my approach to this comes from this history that I've talked about with regards to having worked on the importance of having cultural preservation, historic preservation. We must remember in this moment that there is a lot of historical trauma faced by many communities. In New Mexico, Native Americans have had, there's been much tragedy with regards to Native Americans, right? And we know that. And we know that these lands were originally theirs. I've worked with Native Americans. I am endorsed by many Native American tribes and have received lots of support by many others. And, they are the core base of people who support me. But I'm also, as I mentioned, I was on the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation, named by President Obama to work on this issue nationwide, because it's important to recognize all stories in the American story, but to also honor that there are these historic traumas that we must address. The way to do that is not to throw gas on the fire, not to turn it into a campaign issue and campaign around it. I was saddened to see that issue, because I don't know if you have, but I've actually read Fray Angelico Chavez. I've read his books, so I honor those books. The way to do it is in conversation. Albuquerque has started that. I'm proud of the way Albuquerque is bringing people together to have those very hard conversations. Don't take action.
Your time is up.
Have important conversations.
Time is up, and I did see the fly. Well, you have one of the nation's biggest nuclear weapons laboratories in your district. What is your position on calls for disarmament, the importance of the nation's nuclear deterrent in today's world, and the enormous cost that goes along with it? Ms. Leger Fernandez, you go first.
Yes, the labs have been very important with regards to addressing our nuclear insecurity that we now have in the United States. There was a moment, right? We all remember when there was a moment as Cold War ended when we could have moved further back, but we didn't. Right now, after this presidency, we are in a more nuclear unstable world than we ever have been. The Los Alamos National Lab really has played an important role in making sure that we have the science behind testing, so we're not testing nuclear weapons anymore. What I would like us to see happen at the labs, however, is to keep what they're needed to do, because we're not in a safe place. But I would like us to move more of our funding to a place where we are funding hard science that are other national security threats. Our other national security threats include things like this pandemic. Our other national security threats include the climate crisis. The climate crisis is such a national security threat. They're doing work on that now. I would like them to do more work on that so that we can then have spin-offs of the technology that we need to make sure that our battery life is larger, that we're able to save renewable energy for when we need it. So I think our labs can do a lot of that. I would really like to see us move away from how close we've gotten in that doomsday clock. It's scary.
Ms. Johnson, your answer.
It is important to note that I would like to see a safer United States. Promoting nuclear as a deterrence is key. I fully support 110% the labs. Alamos lab has been key, not only in the past 75 years, but right now to maintaining our national security. So I support making sure that we have the infrastructure in Los Alamos and the surrounding environment to make sure that we are doing things safe. And as an environmental engineer, this is extremely important that we have safety in whatever we are doing, providing the nuclear deterrence. There are regimes such as Russia, China, and Iran, as well as North Korea, that make no qualms about having nefarious intent. So we need to make sure that we are strong in our national security. My opponent would make us less safe. It's time to vote your values and vote for a better New Mexico, where we have the opportunity for infrastructure, where we have funding going into the labs as a #1 priority.
Time for debate questions is now up. We are now moving to closing statements. Because Teresa Fernandez went first on opening, she will go last this time around. Ms. Johnson, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. Muchísimas gracias. My name is Alexis Martinez Johnson. I'm a mother, a wife, and an environmental engineer. I look forward to working with New Mexicans. Like my opponent, dodging forums with the Farm and the Livestock Bureau, with the Chamber of Commerce in Rio Rancho, speaking with academic elites on the East and the West Coast, because that's who funnels money into her campaign. Do you know that I have the voice of New Mexico? And I know that it must be an honor to be appointed by President Obama. But for me, the honor for me is to be elected, appointed here by the everyday New Mexican, because they see that their voice is no longer heard, because they don't have the special interest money to put in these candidates' pocket. I am a homegrown native New Mexican, but not only that, not only am I an Indian country, not only can I promote our Hispanic community and every other race, gender, and religion in New Mexico, but I have a very unique skill set, and that is putting party politics behind and coming together as New Mexicans. So when my opponent has said, I'm looking forward to defeating a party, what I see is someone telling my children that they look forward to defeating their future. I am here to work for New Mexicans. I do not support late-term abortion, who has backed my opponent in New Mexico overwhelmingly, irrespective of party. We say it is not okay at 32 weeks with no emergency to have a life of our Hispanic babies in Indian country taken. I stand for life, and I stand for our Second Amendment. I stand for small business.
Your time is up,
Ms.
Johnson. Thank you. Ms. Fernandez, you have 2 minutes as well.
Thank you. Protecting our families, our health care, our democracy is never more important than now, when President Trump has failed us. His failures have cost our Native American communities their lives and livelihood, those most at risk. Our kids aren't in school, and our economy is a mess. While we all pray for President Trump's recovery, we must admit the failures of his COVID response. My opponent has said that she stands 100% with our President Donald Trump on his COVID response. In contrast, I believe we need leadership that is about caring for our communities, that puts public health above politics. I'm talking about the issues because I have experience working on them, the issues we must address now. I have brought hundreds of millions of dollars to help build clean water, broadband, health clinics, schools, businesses. I've worked with and in our Native American communities. I've gone to court to protect our voting rights. Yes, 2 presidents have appointed me, Obama as well as Clinton, to work on affordable housing and protecting our diverse cultural and historic heritage for our country. I am asking your vote. I, Teresa Fernandez, am asking for your vote. If you want a leader who has direct experience working on the issues that we must address now, direct experience protecting our environment, addressing our healthcare, creating jobs, I urge you to take the time and to look at our records and make sure you understand that what has been told here that is truthful and that is not. I very, very much enjoyed speaking to you, the listeners. Muchísimas gracias. Te pido tu voto.
Your time is up. To both candidates, thank you for your participation in our Commitment 2020 debate.
To our partners at the Albuquerque Journal, thank you for your commitment to political coverage and making sure New Mexicans know as much as possible about the people they'll see on their ballot. You can find the debate you just saw at KOAT.com and at the Albuquerque Journal website, abqjournal.com.